Hello to my fire rising signs, Aries, Leo and Sagittarius. Welcome to the Capricorn full moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising signs listed below. Hello Aries Rising, welcome to your reading for the Capricorn full moon happening very soon this Sunday, July the 21st at 8:19 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. Hi, how are you? I'm so sorry that I've been gone, Aries. I got very, very sick and it's taken me a full month to recalibrate and to sort of come back to a place where I feel okay. I had a fever and I dropped my phone and everything just fell to shit all in a matter of a couple of days. And I think that I can probably use some of this astrology, not to explain it away, but to sort of allow myself a bit of room to look at what happened and to give this experience a bit of context. I have been in a very Gemini mode for some time since Jupiter entered Gemini. We know that Jupiter in astrology expands upon the topic. It sort of zooms in. And Jupiter's very uncomfortable in the sign Gemini because it would much prefer to be across the way in Sagittarius. And when we think about the sign Gemini, we think about an internal conversation. We think about duality and the light and shade, or the investigation that can happen through discussing, through conversing about the thing. And so if there's an exacerbation on that, you can see that there's an over-analysis, and that can lead to something that feels like analysis paralysis too. In moments where I've woken up and I was already mid-conversation, realizing that my body was exhausted because the sleep was really overactive too, that there was sort of continual movement, brought my physical body to a space where it was like, okay, if you're not going to shut up, I'm going to force you to shut up. And so that's sort of what happened for me. And then in that moment of having everything sort of fall away from me, there was a journey that I took to the underworld. And it's taken me a lot of reading and a lot of meditation to give that some context as well. So I wonder if you can identify with any of that, Aries Rising. We're looking at a Capricorn full moon that is highlighting your 10th house, your most public-facing self. And it's the second of a series. So in the month that I was gone, there was a Capricorn full moon. And then there was a Cancer new moon. And now another Capricorn full moon happens from time to time. So we're looking at this 10th house, this most public-facing self of yours. So maybe a month ago, there was an illumination on that area of your life. Perhaps 2 weeks later, there was hopefully a moment in your home environment that felt productive and felt like you were planting something that could be substantial. And then now we're sitting at another emanation or illumination of your 10th house, your most public-facing self. This time the moon's at 29 degrees of Capricorn, which is a very pivotal part of any sign. The 29th degree, in astrology it's called the anaretic degree, but it's like a last hurrah. It's a culmination of everything that has gone before in that sign, in that journey. And this moon, because it's at 29 degrees of Capricorn, is in near exact conjunction with Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now Pluto is currently moving backwards from our perspective, and will soon re-enter Capricorn at 29 degrees, and will sit there from September to December. It's a moment that a lot of astrologers have been earmarking. It reminds me of the journey of Pluto through Capricorn and what that could represent for us. Pluto transits never fail to show their power. But in my journey with the underworld, which is where Pluto rules, things that are hidden, things that need to be brought up, things that have been buried for a time, there's something in those mythologies that has led me to a place where I now have to and will forevermore include Ceres, the asteroid, the goddess of agriculture, and also Proserpina, the goddess of spring, the daughter of Ceres, and also the queen of the underworld. I'm sure that I've told you the story before, but we can look at it again at this time, I think, Aries Rising. To paraphrase the mythology very quickly, Ceres went on a quest to retrieve her daughter Proserpina, who was abducted by Pluto and dragged to the underworld for her beauty. Pluto became obsessed with the sight of her. And so in Ceres and her journey to the underworld, her responsibilities of agriculture and of harvest and of fertile crop lay waste and froze over. Ceres didn't eat anything for days on end in her journey to find Proserpina. When she got there, Proserpina had eaten pomegranate seeds, which was one of the foods of the underworld. And so Ceres bargained with Pluto to bring her daughter back. She was furious and she laid curse upon curse in her rage. And Proserpina and Pluto struck up a bargain where Pluto could have Proserpina for 6 months of the year. And for 6 months of the year, she would be back on home soil. But the underworld became her home soil too, and this is the part of the story that we must remember. And bring her into the mix here, because when we look at these conflicting transits and we feel all of this tension in the air, and we look to the patriarchal archetypes of the zodiac, we look to Saturn, to Jupiter, all of this fight for power that permeates the culture at present, permeates the individual. Everyone is fighting for some sense of autonomy and power over their own lives. I look to this journey with the underworld to flesh out my experience with Pluto. I had an incredible time with Pluto in 2020 particularly, but that traveled on into 2021. And in my mind's eye, I felt that I had surmounted that. Turns out the journey to the underworld bears some gold too. When I think about the image of Proserpina, I think about the image of the queen of the underworld. I think about her power in that place. I think about her beauty. And I think about the emanations of my own creativity over many, many years, where I unconsciously embodied that darkness and found the beauty in it. The way that my mind moves to different art forms and tends to be drawn to that which looks like darkness. I wonder if that story can aid you in your own journey, Aries Rising. Because in 2020, Pluto and Saturn made a conjunction, that is true. Also, Ceres was in the mix. And so Ceres is making their 4.5-year journey around the zodiac, and will meet up again with Pluto in December of this year at the 0 degree point of Aquarius. And so I wonder what we've learned in that journey in the underworld over these last 4.5 years, Aries Rising, that is coming to light again and is giving you a sense of power. I wonder how that's influencing your public-facing self, how you put yourself out there into the world, how you're perceived. I wonder if there's a sense of beauty in your journey with the darkness. There is also an asteroid called Proserpina as well that I've been tracking. And so at the Cancer new moon that I missed 2 weeks ago, Jupiter and Proserpina were in exact conjunction. And this was at a time when my investigation grew really quickly. I think that there's a lot to be used at this time, Aries Rising. I hope that you can feel that, and I hope that in this moment, simply of reflection that's required of all of us, we can look back to 2020, we can look back to the way that our perception has shifted so rapidly, so sincerely, and hopefully you can find some gold in that darkness. Now Mars, your guiding light, we've just moved through an incredibly robust, incredibly fraught, tense conjunction with Uranus in Taurus at 26 degrees, which is affecting your second house. You may have not felt that so personally. However, as an Aries rising, with Mars being your guiding light, there could have been something there. There could have been a conflict about the way that you are feathering your nest, putting money in your own pocket, taking care of yourself, your financial autonomy, the rebelliousness that you embody in that area. There could have been something that came a bit like stark news that you've had to contend with around the 16th of July. We're going to move through that. We know that Mars moves really quickly. But then at this full moon in Capricorn, Mars will have just entered into Gemini. And so this sort of growing sense of articulation might be coming over you. There might be further heated moments in the ways that you talk about your financial responsibilities, your money, where that's coming from, the commitment to being a rebel, but also the container that we have to contend with too in this life, the responsibilities that each of us have to find ways to creatively reconfigure and wiggle out of or submit to. This is the Hierophant, this is the Hierophant. I can never pronounce it right, I always vacillate, doesn't matter. In my work with this card, I have come to reconfigure or redefine my definition for this image. And I'm working with the Modern Witch Tarot by Lisa Sterle at this moment, and this deck was pivotal in my understanding or reconfiguration of what I'm looking at. In the more traditional, older, Victorian-drawn decks, the Hierophant is depicted as a pope, which is an incredibly repellent image to so many of us that have been using our livelihood, our lives, to deny that we are heathens. This is something that every queer person consciously, unconsciously grapples with, this idea of reckoning with the history and kicking back from it and redefining our rights. In tarot, in this version of the tarot and in other decks that I have, the Hierophant is represented as a bridge. You can see here she's a soothsayer. She's opened her mind. Folks like the Oracle of Delphi, if you like, have come to listen to this Hierophant. And there's nothing there's nothing judgmental about the advice gleaned or the wisdom given here. And so maybe in that space of getting in touch with your own Hierophant, getting in touch with your own bridge, your own guide, you've found something that feels like an emblem of truth. It feels juvenile, but it feels honest. You know how children oftentimes have an inability to not tell the truth. Sometimes at really inopportune times, they'll just blurt it out. But this journey that you've been going on internally with understanding your bridge, understanding your connection to the magical realm, has provided you and offered you a seed of truth here. And I think that it's leading you back into something that feels like a reunion or feels like a communion with something very sweet and very tender and very connected. this offer of love. Perhaps you're offering that to yourself again at long last, after a time of much tension and much conflict. There's been room enough for you to recognize that your intricate beauty is so valid and welcome in this life, and your beautiful mind, the way that it operates, perhaps in alternative ways to the way that society would have it, is beautiful. And maybe somewhere too, Aries rising, this reconfiguration of the structures of our culture, the reconfiguration, redefining what hierarchy, what the Hierophant represents. Perhaps you've created room for yourself in your own self-awareness, that your individuality, that your certain way of looking at life is so welcome here. I think that perhaps some conversations around money can be really jarring, especially as you get older, as I'm rapidly realizing. A lot of creative types know how to live off the smell of an oily rag. A lot of creative types make that pact with themselves, that consumerism and that financial growth is a sacrifice that they make to the altar of creativity. It's becoming more and more difficult to hold that oath, to maintain that pact with creativity, because things are getting far, far, far more expensive. And I think as you get older, your energy stores become reconfigured to, perhaps you don't have as much energy as you used to continue this fight. I've been thinking so much about the current tension of the moment, Aries rising, and I've been thinking about how this echoes parts of our journey, the past, the human experience. And I think about the art that was created during such tense, dense, conflicted times. And I think about the emanation of love that a lot of that art depicted. I think about the journey with Proserpina, and I think about the emanation of darkness that art emanated too, and the recalibration of light and shadow that art represented. I think the time is now to start creating more of that. I think the time is now to create love in our own lives, create beauty in our own lives, and to include some of that melancholy, some of that darkness, if it ever shows up in your spirit. You don't have to hide from it. Your darkness is as beautiful as your light. We balance them. We provide space for both. Much love to you, Aries rising. I hope that was okay, and I hope that it was worth the wait. If you're still here with me, let me know. Send me some love in the comments. I can draw your birth chart, and you can make your appointment over at umaruby.com. So I'll draw it in my style, and we can make an appointment to read it with one another. If you'd like to support my work, you can put some money in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. If you are in Melbourne town and you'd like a face-to-face reading with me, I am going to be working at Muses of Mystery, which is a shop in the Nicholas building, for a month of Sundays. So you can go to their website. I'll put the link in the description below, and you can make an appointment for a face-to-face tarot reading with me if that's something you'd like to do. Much love. Take very good care of yourself, Aries, and I'll be with you soon. We'll talk about the Leo new moon. We'll talk about other things as well. We can loosen our grip, perhaps, on the structures sometimes, and create new things together, create new rituals. So until then, I love you. Hello, Leo Rising. Welcome to your reading for the Capricorn full moon happening very soon, this Sunday, the 21st of July at 8:19 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. Hi, how are you? I'm so sorry that I've been gone for so long. It's been a month. I got very, very unwell. I got a fever and I dropped my phone and it was all a disaster. And I really needed to take this time to recalibrate. And part of my journey, part of my healing process was to go deep. And I got stuck there, but then I found the gold while I was there too, hopefully. It's an ongoing process. But part of my excavation was a recommitment to the beauty of my darkness. And it's been quite a trip. Let's look at the astrology first for this moon, and then we can backtrack if you like. We might peek into the future too, just to see what's in store. So this full moon in Capricorn is the second of a series. So in the time that I was gone, there was a full moon in Capricorn, a new moon in Cancer, and now a second full moon in Capricorn. So for the last month, there has been a focus or a spotlight onto your sixth house of service, of repetition, of the health of your body, of your ecosystem. And also there was a moment to sow some seeds in your unconscious world, your private hidden work. Now looking at this second full moon in Capricorn, it's hitting a very pivotal degree of Capricorn, of every sign. The 29th degree is called the anaretic degree in astrology, and it's like the last final hurrah, the last journey. Hopefully, with lessons learned, we move into the next sign. And this moon at 29 degrees will be in conjunction with Pluto in Aquarius at 0 degrees. So you can see that they're separated by sign, but they're very, very close together. And so the sun in Capricorn is shining its light both on the moon and on Pluto. Now we know that we've been journeying with Pluto, or we've been preparing for the journey with Pluto for some time. We know that Pluto will be in Aquarius full time from November of this year or December of this year. However, it's going to make a final guest spot, special guest star in Capricorn at the 29th degree. So we're sort of in this moment of instability, of turbulence, but also there are lessons that need to be remembered or gleaned from what we experienced with Pluto in Capricorn. And this was an experience from 2009 to this moment. Pluto has been in Aquarius for all of that time. But these last transits, these last degrees have been really highlighting for so many of us this disintegration of an old way of thinking and being, and the rebirth of something new and something real. And for you, Leo, on your birth chart, Aquarius is the 7th house, so it's the house of other people. If you're a Leo rising, this is your soul's purpose. This is your soul's rising intention. We look straight across the way, and there's Aquarius. So Pluto is going to be preparing to make its long 20-year ascent journey through your 7th house. And so at this full moon, we're on the topic of the underworld. We're on the topic of what is hidden beneath the surface. We're on the topic of excavation, hopefully to find some gold in that place. Now, when I think about Pluto, my mind is cast to January of 2020. And this was when Saturn, the boundary maker, the restrictor, came into conjunction with Pluto. It was in Capricorn at 22 degrees. The other cosmic body that was co-present with this moment, which it almost feels cliched to cast our mind back to 2020 and to witness the reconfiguration or the extermination of a way of life into something new. The pandemic brought around so much fear and so much death and so much worry and so much righteousness and delusion too. But going back to that moment, the other deity, cosmic body that was co-present was the asteroid Ceres. Now, Ceres in the mythology was the priestess, the goddess of agriculture, the harvest, of feeding. And one of the mythologies that is on the topic of Ceres is her journey to the underworld to hold audience with Pluto to retrieve her daughter, Proserpina, or in the Greek it was Persephone, who had been kidnapped by Pluto. And when we look at the astrology of Ceres, we look to things like separation, we look to things like relationships with food, we look to things like nourishment or lack of, also reclamation and reunion with loved ones. We talk about nurturing and all of those sorts of topics. When dealing with the mythology of Pluto and of Ceres, it's imperative that we bring Proserpina into the mix too. For this individual, this goddess, this priestess, has power of her very own. So one of the stories, yes, is that she was abducted. One of the stories is that she was held in the underworld. Another part of the story is that she ate the pomegranate seeds, which was food of the underworld, and that a bargain was struck between Ceres and Pluto that she was allowed her daughter back for only 6 months of the year. For the other 6 months of the year, Proserpina was the queen of the underworld. She held just as much beauty and just as much station and power as her partner, as the lord of the underworld. But there's something in this mythology about the beauty in the darkness, which is what I discovered in the month that I've been gone. I think for a lot of us that have our own pathways or our own experience with that journey can feel so intense. The descent, when you can start to feel yourself move further and further down into something that feels really deep. There can be a fear of it all happening again. However, when I think about the presence of Proserpina in that place, and I think about the tears of poppies that Ceres cried as she was looking for her daughter, all of the poppies that sprouted in the wheat fields, as she was maddeningly looking for her daughter, I feel the poetry so beautifully. I think about Algernon Charles Pierce, who wrote the hymn to Proserpina, and also the Garden of Proserpina, two beautiful Victorian poems on the topics of these ancient stories. I feel the power and I feel the gold that we might be able to find here. All of that is to say, Ceres is making her move back to a conjunction with Pluto again. This will happen in December of this year at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is where Pluto and this moon are sort of right now. So when thinking about journeys to the underworld, when thinking about some kind of rebirthing ritual, when thinking about our own polarity, our light, which is very popular and very beautiful and very much needed. Forgive me, I'm losing my train of thought here, there, and everywhere, but let's continue. Our light is so beautiful and so gorgeous and so valid. So is our darkness. So is our shadow. It's how we work in Shadowland that makes the difference, and it's not easy. It actually is sort of sometimes like wading through the muck, wearing a gown. It can feel like it's dragging you down. But what I've kind of learned in this perpetual rhythm of mine, and many battles and many struggles and many tests that I've put myself through with the aid of incredible help and love and support from my dear ones that rally around me, is that to be present in that moment of darkness changes the light, changes the color. You can start to see in the dark if you commit to being present within it. There's an asteroid called Proserpina too. Proserpina and Ceres have a very strange orbit with one another. They are quite syncopated. And they come and they meet together for a period of 8-ish years, but only every 70-ish years. I'm still doing my research. I have to look through an ephemeris to sort of get this down. But it sort of reminds me of the beautiful reunion of Proserpina and Ceres, but also in tandem with that, perhaps something like a beautiful reunion with Pluto and Proserpina too. She enjoyed being queen of the underworld. Let's get some tarot, Leo rising. Maybe some of this is sort of helping you in this illumination of your 6th house. Hopefully it might be. You know that the sun is lighting up the 12th house, which is the unconscious world, and the moon is over in the 6th house, which is the physical world, your physical health. And so there's something that we're dancing with here about health on both sides. Yeah. It can show up in all physical, symptomatic ways as well, when our unconscious reality is struggling. Our physical body can sometimes show the symptoms of that. I think that's what happened to me when I got so sick. And I think that this might be happening for you too, Leo. We'll see. If it's not, that's okay. These readings they have their own flow. But there's something that I can see here about restriction and barrier and anxiety that's really obvious at this time. I think that possibly in the not so distant past, there was a sort of contemplative moment for you, and perhaps the melancholy sort of grew with the tide into this moment where that feeling of sort of gentle, melancholic emotion grew to a point that reached anxiety, which is a symptom of a mind in crisis. When we start to project our fears onto the future, when we recall from the past to a moment that can start to affect our physical self. There's a great book that I'd love for you to read if you haven't already. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And these two cards are maybe speaking about that topic. It's incredibly robust and incredibly informative. I wouldn't suggest that you take some time to read it, but it does, to paraphrase it very clunkily with tarot cards, it does, and also the astrology, it does speak about trauma responses to a very fine, beautiful degree. It's like a pivotal text that opened up that research for folks that work in psychology, and a great help for so many of us that can sometimes be caged or contained by our mind and its operating systems. The body keeps the score, so the body remembers, or the mind keeps everything in check and then informs the body that things might be occurring again, that we might be in danger again. And so in these moments of contemplation, we really have to ask ourselves if that's the fact, or if we were perhaps being called back to a time and a space that did include a lot of pain. And so yeah, I am going to say it to everyone. Now is the time to open up your avenues to receive support if you need that. There was something really pivotal that happened this week, the 16th of July. There was a very robust, very conflicted, very aggressive, agitated conjunction between Mars and Uranus, and also the fixed star Algol, which is the demon star, the head of Medusa. So it feels almost like a public beheading in some way in your 10th house. So maybe in relationship to the work that you're doing, there might be some agitation or fear around that that's brought up all of this instability for you. Moving ahead, we're back to Capricorn land. So we're back to the physical self, the physical body and its teachings, its cues, its lessons, its messages for you. The polarity of Cancer and Capricorn will always speak to your unconscious reality and your conscious reality, your dream state and your physical well-being, your physical health. So if my story of my physical body enforcing a stopgap with the overactive mind and the anxiety that I was unconsciously or very consciously sometimes experiencing, then this has all come at a time that I want to support you, Leo Rising, and I also want to encourage you to seek out the help where you can get it. Start with that book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a very, very informative, helpful text. And when moving with this astrology and moving with your own physical and mental health, no one can do it alone, no matter who they are. Every good therapist has a therapist. If you're in a financial position where you can afford therapy, seek it out. If not, then look to the folks around you in your very nearby environment, people that care about you, and let them know that you've been struggling and that you're not okay at this time. You will be okay in time, but some of these journeys with the darkness and the underground, when not ready for them, they can be really destabilizing. So as much as I am well versed in the journey with the underworld, I know that it can be really a spooky place to be alone. So reach out to folks around you if needs be. That's your reading, Leo Rising. Thank you very much for being here with me. Put some, just let me know how you are. Just write to me in the comments. That'd be awesome. If you'd like me to draw your birth chart, I will. They look like this, and you can make your appointment with me at umaruby.com. If you'd like to support my work, you can put some money in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby, and you can also subscribe for $10 Australian a month. I'll be with you soon enough, and we're actually going to be talking about a new moon in Leo. So we're going to be zoning back in to your first house of yourself and your soul's rising intention and the trueness of your nature. We're going to be working with a moment of manifestation to help you along and through on this path. Much love to you, Leo Rising. Take very good care of yourself, and I'll speak to you soon. Hello, Sagittarius Rising. Welcome to your reading for the Capricorn full moon, happening very soon on Sunday the 21st of July at 8:19 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. Hi, how are you? I'm so sorry that I've been away for so long. It's been a month or so. I got very sick and I went on a very deep, very important journey to something that felt like the underworld for a time. My physical self was feverish and I hadn't been sick like that in a very, very long time. And all of my scheduling and responsibilities seemed so firmly out of my grasp. And I dropped my phone on the train and it was a disaster. I'm back here now in the afterglow of such important work. So hopefully I've got some information here for you, Sagittarius Rising, that will help with this moon and also just this current texture, this current climate of time. So I want to speak about your guiding light for a time, which is the planet Jupiter. And Jupiter has a great expansive quality to it. Jupiter is very optimistic and can be very helpful in guiding a Sagittarius rising along on their journey. We look to things like hope and optimism and good faith when we think about Jupiter. Right now, as it stands, Jupiter is in the opposite sign to you. So Jupiter is over in Gemini in your seventh house of relationships, of how you interact with other people. Now that's good and that's also difficult, because a planet that's in opposition to where they normally do their best work can feel out of their depth. They can feel, it can feel difficult for them to ascertain and to hang on to their power. They'll try, and in emulating the sign Gemini, which represents the twins, which is about duality and conversation, I'm sure that you're not the only one that has been perhaps dealing with the over-analysis of the current texture of time. There has been a lot of relentless conversation that has been occurring, and we can sort of feel that expanding and exacerbating in the way that we are relating to people. I'd like to bring this back to your seventh house, though. I'd like to bring this back to your intimacy in your life. Hopefully the conversations that have been occurring for you in that part of your life with those people that are very intimate to you, hopefully they've been productive. Hopefully they've been fruitful in some capacity. Now, in the time that I was away, Jupiter, the great expander, was forming a exact, very specific conjunction with an asteroid that is often perhaps not talked about in a traditional sense in astrology. Every astrologer has a different idea on how they relate to the asteroids and their power and their effect over a current moment. In the way that we are journeying to the underworld together as a collective thought form, a collective consciousness, as we are really contending with the definition of Pluto and what that Lord of the underworld may represent, as we're dealing and sitting at a quality of time which this moon is highlighting, this final dance of Pluto in the sign Capricorn, which represents traditional hierarchy, or the hierarchy that is ever present, the disintegration and destruction of old power structures, the violence that can be involved in revolution, that Uranus and Mars are highlighting for us. Separate, don't want to confuse you with this. One of the mythologies of Pluto is his abduction of Proserpina. Now I'm using the Roman names here. The ancient Greeks said Persephone and Hades, but you understand. I'm using the Roman Mambo Italiano, but also to tie in with the names of the planets as they stand. Ceres was the goddess of agriculture, of the harvest. Ceres was the one responsible for a good crop. And so folks in their way in the ancient times would pray to Ceres for a good yield. And one of the mythologies was the abduction of her daughter Proserpina by Pluto, who was taken to the underworld for her beauty and was held there. And so in that abduction, Ceres grew ferocious with anger. And in fact, it was Jupiter that gave permission for this abduction. And so Ceres was ferociously angry at Jupiter and went on a quest to the underworld to retrieve her daughter and to bring her back. The other part of this mythology is that Proserpina has autonomy in this story, and Proserpina existed in the underworld in a way that she grew to really understand and really became priestess of. Proserpina became the queen of the underworld. She ate the pomegranate seeds offered to her from Pluto, which is the food of the underworld, and so therefore she had to remain. But the bargain was struck that she could be 6 months with Ceres in the light and 6 months with Pluto in the dark. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because Jupiter and Proserpina were in conjunction at the Cancer new moon that we missed out on discussing. And so when thinking about your birth chart, Sagittarius rising, and thinking about a bargain struck with the darkness, this is something that we all go through. This is something that I continually live through in my own experience, my own perspective of my own life. What I'm coming to understand is that there is absolute beauty and majesty and gorgeousness in the light, and there is also beauty and majesty and gorgeousness to be found in the dark. And so looking at your 7th house, looking at the exacerbation of Jupiter in how you see your relationships working and evolving, there almost might be some concern for folks in your 7th house that you're worried about their journey to the underworld. And so it's at this time that this reading is highlighting this story of Pluto and Ceres and Proserpina for some purpose. If you've been concerned about folks that exist in your 7th house that you care for, I would encourage you at this full moon to make contact and to reach out to them and to check that they are okay and that they have what they need in order to go on this journey. Now, looking at Capricorn on your birth chart, it's in a very different area. It's in your 2nd house, which is your money, your assets, your relationship with finance and being able to take care of yourself. So there was a full moon in Capricorn last month on the 22nd of June. This is the 2nd, and it's at the anaretic degree, the final degree of Capricorn, which is pivotal. It's also in conjunction with Pluto. It's in conjunction with Pluto and Aquarius at 0 degrees. So 29 and 0, they're arm in arm. Aquarius rules your house of the goddess. So these stories around the re-emerging feminine, as Demetra George says in her beautiful book, Asteroid Goddesses, they're coming up for some purpose here. Pluto, the harbinger of destruction, the lord of the underworld, will be existing in your 3rd house of the goddess. So perhaps these mythologies might come in handy for you as time goes on. Pluto will be in that house of the goddess for the next 20 years, and it's up to us to decide and to discover how we can work with the darker forces as well as the light forces. Jupiter, the Lord of Light, is your guiding principle, so we know that that's very firmly in your grasp. The polarity of this is darkness. The polarity of this has a lot of gold to excavate too. Now, if we wanted to cast our mind gently back to January of 2020, difficult for most of us. And as far as on the global stage we can see it, that felt really like a journey to the underworld collectively. Just so happens at that time, Saturn, the boundary maker, the one that restricts and constricts and contains, fell into conjunction with Pluto. But also Jupiter was co-present, and also the asteroid Ceres. Now, by December of this year, Ceres will reconfigure and re-meet, reconjoin Pluto. Ceres takes 4.5 years or so to go around the zodiac. This time, Pluto and Ceres will be conjoined at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So I think this mythology around abandonment, around abduction, around retrieval, around balancing the light and the dark is for all of us at this time. Specifically for you, Sagittarius, it could have a lot to do with your 7th house, for this is where Proserpina exists. Proserpina will move gently into Cancer as time goes on, but because there's an examination and a conversation that's being encouraged at this time with your 7th house, with people that you care about, I suspect that this might be such a perfect opportunity for us to regroup and to check in with one another, that we're all doing our best to go deep, to excavate the gold, and to come back. Perhaps find the beauty in the shadow too. The house of the goddess, Aquarius, Pluto, it's imminent. It's coming your way. But if the culture is teaching us anything, is that we must investigate the feminine principle, the re-emerging feminine, as Dimitri George says. So let's go with that in the rest of this reading. We'll use this moon and we'll examine, we'll highlight, we'll look at our financial stability, although that's a topic that a lot of us are contending with. This current texture of time, nothing feels like enough. Interesting that we talk about series. Let's go with this journey too. Ceres, like all of the deities, all of the gods and goddesses, and all of these archetypes that we work with in our unconscious, they're not all solely benevolent or solely malevolent. I find those words so hard to say. Let's continue. They're not solely good or bad. They each have their own light and shadow. And one of the stories of Ceres, so the goddess of agriculture, the harvest, was there was an emperor, there was a king, his name was Aristicon. It's another hard word for me to say. But he found himself in the glade, the grove of Ceres, and was hunting for lumber. So was chopping down all of these trees, these sacred trees. And Ceres appeared and cursed him with eternal hunger, because he was so greedy that he was just taking what he needed and wanted without any concern for the sacredness of those objects. He was cursed with eternal hunger. And the story of Aristicon goes that nothing satiated him. He wasted his fortune looking for food, for nourishment, because he was eating everything. And it got to a critical point where he was impoverished, destitute, and began eating himself to quench that hunger. When I think about this, and I think about Ceres in Capricorn, and I think about that conjunction in 2020, and I think about the growing popular consciousness that the resources on this planet are absolutely finite, and that the culture of capitalism, growth at all costs, has gotten to a point where there is excess wealth, to the point that the rest of the health of the rest of the living world is less important than the growth of this wealth. This is something that we can kind of work with too, and maybe just in relationship to your 2nd house. So really take this moon and think about your needs versus your wants as well, and think about and be critical about the culture of consumption and consumerism. That's maybe something that Ceres, who is in Capricorn right now, actually, is emanating for all of us. You don't need much to have a fabulous life. You need your bottom line covered, and I completely get that. And I'm working through a very sincere moment of cycles of poverty in my own life. I get it, and I get the terror and the anxiety and the difficulty being able to focus on anything else when the worry of money is ever present. Let's just sit with that idea and that mythology around Aristikon and the overconsumption, and how that can sometimes be a curse. If you're in a moment in your life where nothing feels like enough, where you're finding little pleasure in what you do have, it might just be time to hold audience with Ceres. If you are wanting to ritualize the moment, you could carve her sigil, which is the sickle, into a candle and light it at this full moon, and ask for counsel, ask for advice from Ceres, ask for nourishment from Ceres too. I got the Empress right in the center here, so this talk of the goddess is beautiful at this time, I think. And I can understand that you've been working very hard too, and there might be some frustration there with the amount of commitment to your output, to your process, the hard work that you've been putting in, and the payoff, the benefit from that hard work. That might be something that's showing up for you at this full moon. The emotions might be high around, like I'm working so friggin' hard and I've got this to show for it. I need some help here, man. That might be something that's really rising for you at this time, Sagittarius rising. Again, I would acknowledge that. I feel you. I really do. And the culture has to feel that too. And I think that the more that we reach out to one another, the more that we converse in our 7th house, the more that we share what we've been going through with other people, the more that we can help one another. These are how communities are built. And this is how policy changes, when enough people stand together and say, we actually can't do this anymore. This is not the way to the future that we want. We don't want to idly just witness the destruction of the natural world and the reliance on slave labor. All of these things, we can hold our conviction that if enough of us speak up about this, enough of us change our habits or our reliances, and speak out for those that are struggling, that's how things change. We can kind of feel that we're in that moment right now too, can't we? At other times, for energy's sake, Sagittarius rising, there might be a beautiful allowance for yourself to sit in the idea that this can be true and that can be true as well, and that no action needs to be taken at this time. And when I say that, I mean in this moment. Sometimes with these horoscopes, it can feel, I give 12 of them every 2 weeks. It can feel urgent. And when you're doing your research and reading and keeping up with the mythological connotations and keeping up with what's occurring in the waking world, the real world, the world that we need to have our 2 feet on the ground, it can feel so overwhelming. And so that idea of inaction, it's momentary. By taking the full moon to yourself and being like, right, okay, so this is all very, very true. This is concerning me. How are we going to pay for that? I'm worried about this person. The final advice for this reading is, if you're worried about someone, call them, reach out to them. Let them tell you that they don't require conversation at this time, or that they do. And give yourself a moment to step out of the worry. And then you can recalibrate, and then we can all come together and act. It's the great thing about energy reserves and working with people that you can trust and that you do care for, is that everyone tends to, when it's in synergy, there are people that have the energy and they can pick up the fight, and then when they need to rest, the rested can move forward as well. That's your reading, Sagittarius Rising. I hope that it was beneficial for you. If you're still here with me, just write me something in the comments just to let me know that the message landed. So much love to you. Thank you for sticking by me, and thank you for your patience over this last month in my absence. I really appreciate it. And to those that have written to me and emailed me, it's meant the world. I really appreciate it so much. If you'd like me to read your birth chart, I'll draw you one in my style. They look like this, and we can set up an appointment on Zoom via my website, umaruby.com. If you'd like to support my work, you can put some money in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. I'll be with you in a little while, and we'll talk about the Leo new moon. So that might be really pertinent right now to sow some seeds of conviction and of self-confidence. I think we could all do with a bit of that. And if you are in Melbourne town and you would like a live reading with me for the next month, I'm going to be reading on Sundays in the Nicholas Building at Muses of Mystery. So I'll put the link in the description below as well, and you can make an appointment via them to see me face to face. That's if you're in Melbourne, Australia, for the next month on Sundays. Take good care, Sagittarius Rising. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.